I think it's time to get started.
Mm-hmm.
I want to introduce us. You know, I'm Valerie. Laura, can you raise your hand? Laura, you are our guest of honor tonight. You are signing in from Connecticut, and you're going to answer everyone's questions, as many as we can fit. Carole, please raise your hand. And you're signing in from sunny California. And you are going to be our co-moderator. Carole, you and I are going to take turns reading questions or asking questions, because we both have lists of questions to draw upon to ask Laura. Okay. So I want to thank you all for joining us. And this is the first successful time in this format. So it means a lot that you're here, everybody. And we really appreciate your participating in our maiden voyage. In theory, the recording of this live stream will be available in a few days, if I can make it work. And I ask that you type in a question mark before your question and also after, at the end of your question. So 2 question marks per question, one at the beginning and one at the end, so we can tell questions from comments, okay? If we don't get to your question right away or soon, then please feel free to answer it, to ask it again. Ask your question as many times as you want to. We will try to remember to read out your name as we ask your question to Laura, but if we can pronounce it. If there are names we can't really pronounce or YouTube handles we can't pronounce, we probably won't read them out. I think I already mentioned, but in case I didn't, I'll mention again, on August 30th, we're going to be all 4 of us live again. That's the 3 of us plus Maggie Meister, our good friend, for a Beader's Mocktail Hour, where we're going to share cooking recipes, cocktail recipes, beading recipes, new pieces of beadwork we've made. So it's a Beader's Mocktail Hour. It's just for fun. It's not serious. And on August 31st, which is a Saturday in the afternoon, Maggie Meister is going to be here for a live Q&A, so you can already be thinking about questions you might want to ask Maggie. If you have not seen the two or three interviews I posted with her on this channel, you can check them out. She's like Laura. She's incredibly gifted, and has a completely different aesthetic and approach to beadwork. So thank you for sharing your Friday evening with us, and let's get started. Now I'm going to spotlight Laura, hopefully. And so you'll just see Laura from now on until the end. Okay, Laura, yay. Okay, has anyone got a question?
I don't see any yet.
Okay.
Hi to Lillian from Long Island, New York.
Hey, Lillian, thank you for coming by. Carole, do you have a question for Laura? Otherwise, I can think of one.
Okay, go for it.
All right. So Laura, I've asked you before, but I want to ask you again in case it's changed. If you had to be a piece of beadwork, an antique piece of beadwork from anywhere in the world, any point in time, ancient time, medieval time, modern time, or the future, what piece of beadwork would you be, and what message would you have to share with the world?
I think last time I was a French funerary wreath, right? Isn't that wreath? Is that what I said?
Oh yeah, last time I asked you that question. Last time you were a French beaded funerary wreath. Yeah. And I forget, what message did you have for the world back then?
I just thought, beads are so integral, like in culture and religion and all of that. So I just wanted to, be the one to like escort somebody into the next, wherever they're going. I thought that was, a good idea. But I'm going to change it tonight.
Okay.
I want to be a primitive bead in one of the, look at my hearts.
Look at those hearts. Okay, you want to be a primitive bead?
Yeah, but very primitive, early, like 40,000 years old, something like that.
A piece of beadwork or a bead?
Bead, like a very early, like found a shell, drilled a hole in it kind of bead.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So a really ancient bead, like European Upper Paleolithic, or like, did you come from a cave and were you found in a cave in Turkey or Africa?
I think I think I would be found in a cave in Europe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What message would you have for the world?
I think just a message about the ancient origins of beads and beadwork,
and how important they are.
Yeah.
Were you at one time stitched into a piece of beadwork, or have you always been just an independent bead?
I feel like I was maybe on a piece of sinew around somebody's neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe they wore you as a bead on this piece of sinew as a means of direct decorating their body
Yeah.
or identifying what group they come from?
Yeah, or even like a protective amulet.
A protective amulet to protect them maybe from the evil eye or some kind of harm.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. That's beautiful. Carole, do you have a question for Laura?
Well, I see one from Lillian.
Oh, great. Do you want to read it?
I do. Lillian's asking, how do I learn all peyote beading? She knew, but wants kits like a class for all beading, including craw. It's kind of open-ended.
Okay, Laura, go take it.
I don't do craw really. So to do all of those, you'd be better to kind of go to all different people depending on what you wanted to learn. I think YouTube's actually a really good place to get basics of the stitches, because I tend to do the different variations of peyote and herringbone, but I only do a little bit of right angle, and I don't really do any craw at all. So
okay. So who is a craw teacher out there that we can think of? I can't think of one. I mean, I know David Shedd is a master of craw, but I don't know that he's putting out teaching videos. What about peyote stitch, Carole?
I don't know who's putting out, really good peyote stitch videos. Laura, you have one for bezeling, cabochon, a rivoli in peyote stitch. I guess I'd have to do some investigating on that to see whose videos were less confusing and, on target for the various bead stitches. I mean, as far as a book is concerned, Creative Bead Weaving by Carole Wilcox Wells is an old book, but it's tried and true for all the basic stitches.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And Laura, in your flowers masterclass, you have a lot of peyote flowers, right? Don't you?
Oh, yeah, a lot of those are done with peyote. Some have a little herringbone. Some have a tiny bit of, some of the bases I do are like a right angle ring, but that's about all I do in right angle. So
Okay.
Mostly peyote. Yeah, mostly peyote stitch.
So, I guess what we're suggesting is that you just go on YouTube, type in peyote stitch tutorial, beading tutorial, craw beading tutorial, and see what you find, which teachers you like best. It may take a little bit of sifting, or get Carole Wilcox Wells's book, Creative Bead Weaving, or her next book, which is called The Art and Elegance of Bead Weaving. And there are other teachers out there too. It's a question of finding which teachers really speak to you best, Any other? Oh, now Bridget is saying Bronze Pony. I think, Bridget, that's a YouTube channel, isn't it? Bronze Pony would be a great one to learn peyote stitch and maybe craw. And Stephanie does teaching. Okay, so I think Stephanie leads Bronze Pony, all one word, YouTube channel. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any suggestions as to who's a great craw teacher, that by which we mean cubic right angle weave?
Well, Nancy Graver said Shona Bevan, but a lot of the teachers, it's been my experience that you really need to know the stitches ahead of time, that they incorporate craw or peyote in their work. But if you take a class, Zoom class or an in-person class with them, it's expected that you already know the stitch.
That's right.
Good point. Okay, so Nancy Graver is recommending Jean Power. Jean was just in Chicago teaching for Lisa Garoon at, what is the name of Lisa's bead shop?
City Beads.
Thank you, City Beads, right here in Chicago. And so I had lunch with Jean Power in real life, in person, and Lisa Garoon a couple days ago. It was absolutely wonderful. But Nancy, you're recommending Jean Power as a source for peyote stitch. And I think you're right. Jean has a number of books out. I'm not sure, maybe one of them deals with peyote stitch. I'm not sure, but she is a great teacher. Do we have any other questions? Bridget, you were saying when you were a kid, you collected shells. You drilled a hole in every one of those, and you still have some left. That's wonderful. Yeah, they're worth keeping. So Lillian, I hope we kind of answered your question or helped you move closer to an answer, you know? Anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, I can think of one for you, Laura. Are you able or willing to talk about your next masterclass, how it's coming along? Or is it like top secret?
It's not top secret. I've just started it. So I've been collecting materials, trying to look at some sources of inspiration, and it's going to be outer space. And I think I'm going to structure it the way this past 2 classes I've done. There's like 6 weeks with projects, and each of those weeks it's like one solid project, one finished piece each week instead of a bunch of bits and pieces. So I'm going to do that, but I think this is going to be heavy on sculpture because people seem to really like the sculpture that I've been doing. So at least 3 of the 6 projects would be sculpture, if not more than that. So
okay. So have you figured out which kinds of cosmic formations? Like, will you be showing a black hole or an event horizon or like an asteroid or a galaxy?
well, I think galaxies. I've looked at a lot of images of galaxies. Nebulas are awesome. So I have a few of those that I printed out and hung up on my wall. And then, a lot of it, I really don't know that much about space. So it's kind of exciting for me to pick something that I'm not real familiar with and then go have to research it a bit.
So what kind of techniques do you anticipate using? Are you able to predict that yet?
Not well, I always use peyote stitch and herringbone, so that kind of goes without saying. But I like to try to do different stuff in each project, stuff that I haven't done before, or sort of reconfiguring of stitches I've done before. So yeah, I imagine those are my primary ones for construction that I use. So yeah.
And this next master class on the cosmos, is that right? Galaxies?
Yep. Outer space.
Galaxies. Well, outer space, that'll be out next year.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get it wrapped up so that I can. Usually I do signups in like March, and then I usually allow like 5 or 6 weeks to start it, just because it can take a long time for the kit boxes to get like down to Australia, and so we have to leave enough time for everything to arrive before we start.
Right, and as I think we talked about in one of our interviews from earlier this year, there's like 30 separate steps you have to go through to launch a masterclass, or there's at least 25 or 28. I know I wrote them all down. And it's such a huge amount of work to bring one of these masterclasses to fruition. Will you still be bringing smaller kits into being between now and then, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple actually that are going to come out in the next month or so. That are just smaller. One's a video workshop, a single project, and then one is it's a project I did years and years and years and years ago. A piece that I sold like before I was really teaching, and I've had a lot of people ask about it. I sold the piece a long time ago, but I've had pictures of it, so people have asked and asked and asked. So I finally did that as a kit. So I'm going to try to release that soon. So,
and that will be a necklace or?
It's a necklace. Yeah,
it's
a necklace. Okay. Pretty elaborate necklace. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And what techniques does it involve?
Herringbone and peyote stitch. Just those 2. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's cool. It has kind of an ornate pendant that's removable. Like it's got a button on it, so you can take it off, put it back on again.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just so impressed. Your imagination seems to be endless. You seem to have so many, many, many new ideas for pieces, and for master classes. And, you're really impressive as basically a one-person show, a solopreneur, we would say. You're just very impressive, Laura, Yeah. Anyone else have any questions for Laura?
There are some other questions. Nancy Graver is asking, ask Laura about creativity.
My favorite topic.
Okay, it's Laura's favorite topic. Laura, please talk about creativity.
I love creativity. It's like a lifestyle. It's not just an art thing. but it's something I'm really passionate about. And that's why I got into doing the master classes, is because I really, in teaching the one-day workshops, I never, ever, ever got to like adventure into the realm of, creativity with people, because there just wasn't time. But it's a big part of what I do. I spend a lot of time trying to get inspired, and then creating my creative space that I can work in. So it really is. It's like my sanity, definitely, being able to come up with new ideas and play with beads. So.
And today you mentioned that you spent the day trying to do the mortar on a fence or repairing a fence outside in your yard. Do you feel that a day away from beading or your beading studio, does that kind of contribute to your creativity or nurture your creativity? Did you find yourself thinking about pieces that you're working on when you were out there in the yard?
Yeah, I do a lot. I think, doing stuff like that is creative work. Everything is creative work if you approach it with the right approach. Because doing the garden and making all the decisions involved there. And then I came in and I cooked a big dinner, and like all of that is creative, activities. And I do think it's good to break up the beading all the time with doing stuff like that, because like you said, I do think about projects that I'm working on, like my brain goes there, but it's good for my body to be doing other things too. So.
And you're often up really, really early in the morning. So did you start out beading really early this morning and then you went to the yard?
What? No, this morning. This is my staycation. I have 2 weeks off, we'll say, where I am doing all the chores and the stuff that I think I need to do in my house. So I spent all morning putting treads in my spiral staircase up the back stairs.
Wait,
so.
You put treads in your spiral staircase? Okay.
Treads down,
Are they the mosaic ones?
No, it's just a regular, just regular carpet treads. But the staircase is painted hardwood and it's very slippery. So after a few too many falls down the spiral staircases, I've been putting treads in. So
that seems like a very good idea. I have to put, treads in for my dog because she's slipping on the stairs. Anyway, that's another story. Carole, are you seeing any other questions for Laura?
I am. I'm seeing, and I tried to answer it, but it's not letting me post it. Lillian asked what Laura's website is, and it's not letting me post it. I don't know why. And the other question along with that, and I'm not sure, it's Lillian asked, what was the Bronx? And I didn't hear that, so I'm not sure that it's a typo or something that I missed too.
What was, yeah.
But
my website is justletmebead.com.
Thank you.
And so all those 4 words mixed together, justletmebead.com, right?
Yep.
But I found out that if you type in Laura McCabe beading into Google, you'll be taken to Laura's website, right? Oh. Now I'm not sure about the Bronx. I don't know how that figures into our conversation. But Lorraine was just saying that, what happened to that? Kelly Dale from Off the Beaded Path has amazing tutorials, beading tutorials on YouTube. Wow. So Off the Beaded Path on YouTube. More amazing tutorials. Bridget is saying she uses a lot of buttons in her pieces. Laura, have you been using buttons? I don't think so.
Yeah, I used to use tons and tons of buttons, and I have a very soft spot for buttons because of having done historical costume work, so I do use them occasionally. In fact, when I was a kid, there was a factory in our town that we grew up in, and it was a couple from, I think they were from Czechoslovakia, who made buttons. It was a button factory, and they closed very early when I was very young, I think, because mother of pearl buttons went out of fashion. But they always had really cool antique mother of pearl buttons at that place. And it was funny because for years I would go in, I'd want to buy buttons, and she'd be like, I don't want to sell the buttons. They were an antique store after they closed the button factory. And I'd go back in and want to buy the buttons, and they didn't want to sell the buttons. And then finally, when I was in college, I went in one day, and she was like 94 by that point. And so Frida said to me, she's like, are you ready? You ready to buy the buttons? And I was like, I'm ready to buy the buttons. Been ready to buy the buttons since I was like 5. And so I bought all the buttons. So I have a lot of buttons.
That's great. Do you think of ways to use them? You know, I mean, do you just keep them?
Yeah, I've used them in some of the projects. They're all mother of pearl, you know, they're old ones. So there, but it was really neat because she, you know, her and her husband had the factory, and so she would show me like the way they made them and the machinery that they used, and the shells came from Australia, actually, learning that they used for the buttons.
So she was finally ready to let them go to you.
Yeah, she was like 94. I mean, she was, yeah, and she finally was like, I'm ready to sell the buttons. So.
And it only took 20 years or 30 years? 20 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the end she wanted it to be with somebody who knew what they were and appreciated them. So I think that's why.
Yeah, and you had kept asking and asking, and
I did. Yeah.
So she knew you were really wanting them.
Yeah, you were serious, and you had kind of staked your claim when you were really young.
When I was really young, yeah. So.
You beat out any competition there may have been.
Yeah. No, actually, it was funny because I had taught, it was my first teaching gig ever. I remember this now. I taught at the Shepherdess in San Diego, and I came home and I spent all of the money I made on my first trip on the buttons at the button shop.
Oh, that's something I would have done. Carole would have done. Any beater worth her salt would have done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good choice. Good choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I love buttons.
Carole, any more questions for Laura?
I don't see any in the stream, and I've scrolled back a little ways, but I have a question for you, Laura. If you were to use another art medium, what would it be?
You know what I've never done, but I'm always like fascinated by is pottery. Like it's so tactile, and I think it's very appealing. I've never even like touched it. I've never done anything with it, but it just seems very appealing to me. And so I think someday I'll have to try it. But yeah, pottery.
Oh, you could do beaded pottery, you know?
I could do.
Like
yeah.
bead mosaic pottery or something like that.
Mm.
Mosaic seems really interesting too. Like Maggie does a lot of that. And
yeah,
that's very intriguing as well. I only did a tiny little bit of it when I was in Barcelona. We took a little class on it, but that's all that I did. So
that sounds like fun. So, earlier this year you talked about raising monarch butterflies or helping them grow from caterpillars into real butterflies. This was back in the winter. So you were kind of overwintering them in one room of your house or one area of your house. How has that been going lately?
Yeah, so all those were the ones that were wintering over were all black swallowtails, and they all hatched. Everybody made it. About half of them hatched in the middle of winter. So I had to leave them in the house. They kind of lived in the house for a few weeks. But now I have a new caterpillar I found this week. It's a Pandora sphinx moth caterpillar. And so he's come inside, and I've been feeding him and everything. And it's a far more complicated one because this one, well, it's 8 weeks in caterpillar form, and they get to be huge. They get to be like 3.5 inches long, the caterpillars. And then they make they pupate in the soil, and then you have to take it and put it in the fridge for the winter to keep it below, temperature. And then I can pull it out in the spring and see if I can get it to hatch. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So how do you know what kind of caterpillar and what kind of butterfly it's going to be? Do you have a book or something?
Yeah, or so on this one, actually, I'd never seen one. I've seen a Pandora sphinx. They're amazing moths. They're like pink and green. They're huge. They're big moths. But I found this caterpillar, actually, a friend's granddaughter was here weeding with me, and she found it, and she was horrified and thought it was gross. But I took it and I looked it up because I'd never seen anything. So I looked on, kind of Googled the descriptive online, and it came up, and it was a Pandora sphinx. So that's my latest creature.
Well, no, where do you find them? Is there a place that to look like on the underside of a leaf or what? On a milkweed pod? What?
So this one was just in the soil. He was just like, walking in a bed. That's where Emma found him. But usually, like with the monarchs, they're on milkweed. So I'll go out. There's areas where there's lots of milkweed, so I can go find them there. Or black swallowtails eat parsley. So I plant parsley and then they usually come to that. So.
Really? So, okay, what's the relationship between cicadas and these caterpillars? You do have cicadas in your area, don't you, or don't you?
Yeah, we do. The cicadas, cicadas, they stay in the ground for like 17 years or something like that. But what I like to do with the cicadas, if I can, is catch them when they're hatching, because they come out of their larval state. And it's usually at night. So you kind of have to catch them at night. But I've discovered that if you can find where the cicadas hatch, they all go there to hatch. So like for me, I'll have like one leaf on a tree and night after night after night after night, there'll be another cicada there hatching. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I see that Priya has joined. Carole, you know Priya, don't you?
I do know Priya. Hi, Priya. And she has a question for you, Laura. She would like to know, who is your guru for art?
Wow. Who is my guru? It's hard to pin it on somebody, right? Because there's so many different people to choose from. I'm trying to think. I love, one of my favorites, historically, René Lalique is one of my favorite artists. He did glass, but there's also a lot of jewelry design that went on too. So I always love Lalique. But I don't know. It's funny because there's historical people, but then there's just modern people, friends who are artists who are just very inspiring, and I have a lot of, admiration for. So.
Do you really like the art of Salvador Dali?
Yes, actually, yeah, I should have said that. I love Salvador Dali. I love the whole surrealist movement and that whole look. That's something that's always appealed to me. So,
and so somebody like Rene Magritte.
Yes, yeah. There's lots of really great surrealist artists. It was actually the first competition I ever did that I entered my beadwork in was a surrealist art competition, and I put some of my eye jewelry into it. It was down in I think it was in Brooklyn, in New York. Yeah. So.
And your two bird feet creatures. Am I getting that right? Your bird feet. They're very surreal.
Oh
bird
yeah.
feet creatures. Very surreal. You just taught a class at the Museum of Beadwork in Portland, Maine, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was really fun. It's it's a brand new project. I'm gonna release it as a video workshop soon. But yeah, it's funny. I did some pieces with actual taxidermy feet, and people really liked it. People really wanted to do it. So I wanted to try to find something that was going to be easier than doing taxidermy. So I got those feet from they're companies that make supplies for people who build decoys. So they're metal cast aluminum feet for duck decoys.
And you were hand painting their toenails, weren't you?
I was, yeah. When you get them, they have rods coming out of them, so you have to cut them and file them and paint them. And then I always like to do the toenails because it's just a nice little finishing touch. So.
And so you taught them for this class you did a couple weeks ago at the Museum of Beadwork, right? How did people take to it? How did they do?
People did great. It was really fun. It was the first time teaching in I haven't gone somewhere in 5 years. So it's been a really long time since I'd been teaching, and it was great. We did really good. It was nice because we did it over 2 days, which made it we could kind of touch on everything without feeling panicked trying to shove it all into one day. So it was, it was a great experience. It was really fun. So.
And that's a beautiful place to teach, right? You have a lot of inspirational pieces of beadwork all around you, right?
Yeah. The museum has great stuff. It's worth a visit if you can find yourself somewhere near Portland. Definitely do it. But she does a really, Christina has a really nicely set up. They have changing exhibitions. They have one area that's dedicated to emerging artists. So there are people who've been beading a relatively short period of time. So that's kind of cool to be able to see what they have there. So yeah, it's a great museum, and I think they're constantly building it too, adding to it, which is really nice.
And don't they have a fundraiser coming up, or it's going on right now? Beaders can donate pieces and then they can sell and raise funds for the museum.
Yeah, that's what they do. They do them. They've done a few, and sometimes people will make pieces and they'll auction them off. And then they also do have like it's like an online auction, I think, where some of us will donate beadwork or donate kits or whatever, and they do that as a fundraiser as well. I want to say that's like October maybe or November that they do that one. And then other than that, they have people make pieces and then they auction those off, and there'll be a theme. Like I think they're doing fishes now, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But people can go on the Museum of Beadwork website and see what they're up to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they have it all there. So, and they're on Instagram too. They have a pretty active like Instagram feed as well.
Excellent.
So,
Okay. Carole, you seeing any questions?
There is another one from Bridget. Do you want to take it?
You can take it.
Okay. Laura, do you use double hole beads a lot? And if so, where are you acquiring them?
I use some super duos and mini duos, and then I use Tilas sometimes, not a whole lot, Tilas and half Tilas. So those, the Tilas, half Tilas are Miyuki. So I get them from, any of the Miyuki suppliers. And then the duos, you can get them here. And then I want to say there's some Czech suppliers as well. But those are really the only ones I use because there's a lot of different ones. And I've kind of stayed away from some of the shapes because what I've found is depending on how popular the shape is, sometimes it gets discontinued. So to use it in like a project and then have to, have trouble finding it when you go to try to teach it. So basically I just stick with duos and Tilas and that's about it. So.
Okay.
I think for the shape beads, they're as readily available in most bead stores, although bead stores are not as prevalent as they once were. But I think all the beads that Laura just listed are available in bead stores.
Yeah, usually they are. They're pretty common. So, yeah.
So Lorraine just made a comment. She had read that Australia did produce and provide great mother of pearl. Oh, so
Yeah.
you're referencing the buttons that the 94-year-old lady finally sold to Laura.
Yeah, it was crazy. They were huge oyster shells, like massive. I've never seen anything so big. And, most of them was like that classic kind of whitish, creamish mother of pearl, but sometimes on the edges there would be black, and that's where they got the black mother of pearl. It wasn't dyed. It was like natural black mother of pearl.
And are they still being made? It sounds like those buttons are not being made, maybe being made somewhere else.
Well, what Rita said is, so when they came over from Czech Republic and set up the factory, they did all mother of pearl, and they did all kinds of stuff. Like they did shirt buttons, like teeny tiny ones, like that they use on like children's clothing, baby clothing, and boot buttons, all sorts of stuff. But she said in the 60s and 70s, like the plastics just totally took over and people didn't really want mother of pearl anymore. They wanted like the plastic buttons. So they shut the factory at that point, I think, stopped producing them. And they ended up becoming antique dealers, actually, is what they did. But it was so cool. Like they must have taken a bunch of the like seconds from the factory and they threw it all out in front of it. So when you drove up the entire driveway, like rather than being gravel, it was buttons. It was so cool.
Well, did you take some? I mean, were you tempted to take some?
Oh yeah, I used to take them every time we went. I'd pick them out of the driveway. But then finally I got to get them. So it was very cool.
Archaeologists will be finding buttons 100, 200 years from now.
They will. They will. Yeah.
And they'll be thinking there was a button factory there when they will be right.
They will be right. Yeah, there was. Actually, I'm trying to think because Carole, you went to UConn.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder it probably was there either as a button factory or as an antique store when you were there. It's not far from campus. So.
Okay. I don't remember going there. Was it towards the Willamette side?
It was. It's in Gurleyville, so it's kind of like if you head south from campus. But it's not as far as like Willimantic, so yeah.
So I'm sorry, what state are we talking about again here?
Oh, Connecticut.
This is Connecticut. Okay, got it. All right. Okay.
Yeah, let's see.
So we have looks like Gumnut Lane Jewelry. That's a great name. I'm from Australia, and my grandmother had a whole cutlery set with mother of pearl handles.
Nice. Awesome.
Sounds nice. Wow.
I think in the stuff I have, they're long mother of pearl pieces that are inlay for handles is what they are. They're these long, because they made buttons, but they did other stuff at the factory too. There was some other pieces that they made. And I have these like long skinny ones that look like they would be like inlay for a handle.
Could you ever turn them into beads, those inlay pieces, or would you use them as inlays?
Yeah, I might, or bead around them. Like that's what I found. There's a bunch of stuff that I got from her that was like cabochon type pieces, and and also when they did the buttons, sometimes they would have like a metal shank, and so some of the ones that I have are like the button without the metal shank. So it might be like a ring of mother of pearl that ultimately would have had a metal shank put into it, but it doesn't. So I kind of use those in all different ways, but yeah, so.
So these were handmade buttons then, weren't they, in effect? I mean,
they were. They would kind of, it's neat. They would core out the shell because they're really thick, and then drill the holes, like the 2 holes, and then they would slice them, to make the buttons. It was neat.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Carole, seeing any new questions or comments?
I do not.
It looks like Bridget is saying, I'm looking for crescent AVAs, AVAs.
Oh, yeah. Those are.
I use the mini duos, super duos too, have to get them online. So sources for crescent AVAs.
Yeah, I get them online too. I think Potomac has them. I think that's where I got them the last time. Yeah, those are. I have used those in a couple of projects. Those crescent ones. Yeah, I think you definitely can find them online. It's not as fun as finding them at a bead store, but there's just not. Maybe where you guys are, there's more. Here, there's very few bead stores. So.
Yeah, it does seem like bead stores have been closing and still are closing kind of everywhere because everything's online now.
It is. And I think COVID kind of accelerated the whole situation as well.
Yeah,
so.
I absolutely agree. Hey, here's Becca. Hey, Becca, thanks for coming by. That's okay. You can be late. It's all right. And you're from Philadelphia. Welcome. Well, if you have a question for Laura, just type it in. Yeah, Bridget, you're right. Potomac Beads is a good source. Yeah. For tutorials on YouTube, they have a great YouTube channel, and of course for beads. Everyone loves them.
Yep, they got good stuff. Yeah, they're one of my go-tos when I can't find stuff. I go there.
Have you ever been there in person to Potomac Beads?
I have not. Nope, I have not.
I haven't. I've heard their name many, many times, but I've never been there.
Yeah, I haven't been.
What about you, Carole?
I have not been. I don't know if they are a brick and mortar store or just strictly online at this point. I know some places started out as brick and mortar and online and then switched to only online.
That's funny. I was assuming that they're brick and mortar, but you're right. Maybe they're not, or maybe they switched. Okay, Becca has a question. Or Rebecca, do you want to read it, Carole?
Those old beads you have on hanks, when do beads become too old to use?
Never. Never. I have a lot of mine, the old seal cuts are from like late 1800s, early 1900s, and I will I'll still use those. The only thing with steel cuts is they're steel and they're not stainless, so you just have to be kind of careful about keeping them somewhere where they're not going to rust. But yeah.
Yeah, and beads are never too old to use.
They're never too old, as long as you can get a thread through them. The ones that are old that are challenging, I don't know if you guys have used them, are the really tiny ones, like the micro beads, like the 22s and 24s. Those can be just logistically hard to work with, but
Because needles are not, sometimes even the size 13 needle, 16 needle isn't quite small enough to go through one of those when you take into account the thread.
Yeah, no, they're so tiny. It's weird because you see them and you're like, how did they even, like, they must have known something we didn't know. So.
I have still some antique needles that were sold to me, antique steel needles. They're about as fine as a human hair. And my source, Scott Bartkey from Chicago, who said they're used by lace makers. And they are so fine. They will thread nylon monofilament. So back when I was using 20s, 22s, and 24s, I was threading them with these 8-inch long antique lace needles. I still have some. Maybe I'll send you one or two. I'm not sure if they're rusty or not, but they worked with really fine nylon monofilament to string the old European glass beads. But obviously you can't do it too much or you'll lose your eyesight, you know.
Yeah, that's what, when I occasionally will like bust this out, but I can usually only do about an hour and then I have to like take it from it because they're so small, so small.
Yeah, no, I agree. Great question, Becca. Any more questions?
Yes. Well, Rebecca gives a shout out to Blue Santa Beads in the Philly area, a full service bead store. And she has another question as to how do you keep beads from rusting? And you kind of alluded to that a little bit.
Yeah. So with the thing with any artifacts, like, because I worked in archaeology for a while, is once it rusts, like you can clean up the rust, but the rusting has started. So ideally you want to keep them from ever rusting in the first place. So for me with the steel cuts, if I can get them not rusted, which is ideal, I'll keep them in plastic bags. I'll keep them with the little silica packs, like, you know, you get sometimes in like shoes and stuff. The silica is really good because it will suck up any moisture. And then if you do have them rust, separate the rusted ones because they'll contaminate all the other ones. So yeah, but basically keep them very dry.
And Bridget says she has beads from the 60s and she uses a size 13 needle. There you go. Maybe Czech beads, I'm going to guess, from beads from Czech Republic, if it would have been called that back then. Probably, Bridget, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. I mean,
so what about glass? Go ahead, Carole.
I was going to say if they were on a hank, they would be Czech, from the Czech Republic.
Good point. Yeah. Good point. Thank you. So what about glass disease, Laura? Have you ever come across glass disease? Like frequently you find it on old white hearts, like 19th century white hearts. Also maybe old blue beads, European blue beads. Are you ever confronted with that?
It's the devitrification, right? Like where,
yes.
I have not dealt with it in beads. Like I remember it being an issue in the conservation lab. You know, they would try to do stuff to, right? Because it's basically like glass rust is what that is.
Yeah, it's just like glass rust. It's due to atmospheric humidity. The beads were not made well with chemically something went wrong apparently, and then 100 years later they get exposed to too much moisture and they start to crumble, they start to rust in effect, right? It's like glass rust,
right?
So sometimes you find it on old beaded artifacts, but not too often. I was just wondering if I know you do collect some old beaded artifacts and you haven't found it so far.
Yeah, I have a few like ancient beads. And like I have an ancient like Roman glass vessel, and that has, you know, it's that rainbow. It's really pretty. It's like that rainbow effect, but unfortunately, it's actually eating the glass. But yeah, it's I don't really like. I'm trying to remember. I think there was some sort of coating that they used to put. I mostly dealt with metal objects when I worked in the conservation lab, but I think there was some kind of like polymer or whatever that they would put over it to kind of stop the process.
To stabilize it. Yeah, I'm sure you're right. But iridized ancient glass with that rainbow coating, iridized coating, whatever it's called, can be so beautiful.
Oh yeah, it is really beautiful. It is. Yeah, glass is really, you know, it's interesting. I learned this in conservation that glass is actually a very slow moving liquid. It's not a solid. And you see it in my house from the 1870, like the windows are all wavy and like slumped. And it's because over very long periods of time, like glass moves, it doesn't stay solid. So
So you're saying the wave not in the glass when the glass was made?
Right. It's from time. Yeah, you get that way. It would have been like crystal clear at the time it was made, and then it just like melts over time. So
Yeah, I think the Corning Museum of Glass is doing research with modern forms of glass and finding new ways to make it move. I don't know. I just skimmed the article briefly that a friend sent. I have to read it in more depth, but they're doing things that you wouldn't think possible with glass, but new forms of glass, I guess, or new ways of working it. I don't know.
nice. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting material.
Totally.
Yeah.
Any more comments?
Well, Bridget says they're sterling, so I'm thinking that she's talking about the beads from the 60s.
Oh, the beads from the 60s. I bet they're beautiful.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, have they tarnished, Bridget? I would think they've tarnished.
Yeah, I imagine they have.
So what's everybody working on? Bridget and Becca and Lillian and who else has come? Marilyn. Who else is here?
Nancy and Lorraine and Priya.
There you go. What are you guys working on right now? What techniques or what projects or what classes or what books are you working on? Oh, Bridget says no, her beads have not tarnished. She keeps them in a velvet case. Nice.
Right. I'm working on a lariat right now. That's what I'm doing.
What technique are you using?
Spiral stitch and like fringe embellishment and a little peyote stitch. So it's a design I'd done a while ago, but I wanted to do a new color of it. So I've been stitching a little bit of that every night.
So you think you'll turn that into a kit, or will it be just for you?
I think I'll probably do it as a kit. I like the color a lot. I think I'll go with it for a kit.
Are you using like delicas or?
It's mostly 15s, of course, but some of the crystal pearls and yeah, some delicas. Trying to think what else. Bunch of drop beads. Yeah, it's kind of. I kind of like sometimes going back to my old stuff and making it, old designs and redoing it in new colors or something like that. So.
You're reinterpreting older designs, classic designs.
Yeah, it's funny how your color aesthetic changes, and when you go to it 5 years, 10 years down the road, all of a sudden you have new ideas and different color sense. So.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe you have some new beads too sometimes.
Yes, that is. Yeah, I just got a bunch of beads when I was up at the Museum of Beadwork too, and many of those are in that project. So.
Oh, excellent! What a good excuse to go and teach a class. I'm sorry, get more beads.
I know. Well, that's the thing is not traveling. When I traveled all the time, I got to see all the new beads at the bead stores. So it was kind of fun. So
definitely, Carole. Any new questions?
Well, there are a lot of people responded as to what they're working on. So Rebecca's working on geometric beaded beads with prismatic right angle weave.
Oh, cool.
And Priya has a question. So let me ask that, and then we'll go back to what other people are working on. Okay. Priya wants to know, how do you choose the designs when you're designing a project?
Ooh, a lot of it is, it's just kind of what strikes my fancy at the time. I'll be in a deco mood and I'll do something art deco. I tend to do a lot of flipping through images, whether it's online Google or if it's through my book. I have tons of books, so I'll go through my art books, and usually that's where it starts. I'll start looking at images and images and images, and then when I find something that is intriguing and that I think will translate well into beads, I'll kind of go from there and then think about how I'm going to make it happen in beads. So, yeah.
Well, to follow along with Priya's question, she says she's working on duoplicity necklace.
Yay!
Bridget's working on making 4 bracelets for her old buddies, trying a tartan plaid with a Celtic style button and foreclosure using gems, pearls, and fire polish. It sounds quite lovely.
Nice.
And Nancy Graver is working on Laura's sculptures from the Codex masterclass and homework for a Sabine structure class tomorrow.
Nice.
And Bridget says she's never done sculptures, not ready for that yet.
Oh,
I always put the yet at the end. I've never done that yet. So it kind of lets you keep the door open to doing something that you haven't done yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Always keep the door open. So.
Yeah, I was with someone, a very well-known beader. I'll keep her privacy, but the other day, and she was just saying she loves your Codex masterclass. She said she thinks it's absolutely brilliant, and just so innovative, and no one else in the field is doing anything like this. What you're doing, bringing in sources of inspiration from so far afield of what we're used to seeing. So that was a real strong vote for your Codex masterclass.
That's so nice. Yeah, it's so fun. It's been such a fun. I just can't stop. I love doing master classes.
Well, you're really good at it, and I think you've really developed an approach, a system for making them as rich and full and inspiring as they are.
Yeah, no, it's worked out for me in the way I like to teach. It's worked out really well, and there's some just amazingly creative beaders out there, which it's a great way to kind of pursue that, and pursue your own designs as well. So.
And I think they like being challenged to not just follow a set of literal instructions or to follow them literally, but to go off onto their own, paths of exploration and come up with things that are really distinctive to them, that are really individual and innovative to them. I think they love it.
Totally. I think when you allow for that, when you make room for that, it's a great thing, because people they have great ideas. I think people question themselves often, but they really don't need to. People are incredibly creative.
And you're there to mentor them, right? You still do the Zoom classes once a week. I can't remember.
Yeah, I do. Like for a master's class, I'll do Zooms, like office hours, a couple times a week. And it's great. And some people always show up, some people never show up. But it's always nice to catch up with people, who want to come in, and we usually are beading together. So
and it's wonderful. It's a community. You're creating community.
It is. I think it's interesting because, I was just talking to some of them the other day, and I think with what's traditionally women's work, which I resent that sometimes when you say that, but you know what I mean, like handcrafts, which are associated with women, there's a huge community factor that plays a part in that. I think the community is important to that craft. I like to foster that. I think that's one thing, like you see with classes, people come to class, but it's about learning, but it's also about being able to spend time together.
Yeah, absolutely. That book by Rozika Parker, is it called The Subversive Stitch? I can't think of the name of it. But she was, on the topic of women's work and how it sometimes gets trivialized. She was, it's been so many years since I read it or even looked at it, but I know she was a voice of critique of the dismissal of women's work, and how it's actually has been extremely important in the world in fostering creativity and community and links between people and shared ideas, sharing the wealth of creativity. Carole, any new comments or questions?
We have a new question from Rebecca. What are your favorite colors to work with?
Laura, your favorite colors?
Sorry, I'm reading.
You're reading them?
It's all in the garden today. I'm tired. My favorite colors are, it depends what colors I'm working with. I go through let me think. Right now on my bead board, I have purples and pinks with some kind of orangey squash colors, mulberries mixed in there. So those are right now my favorite colors because that's what I'm working with. And I'll work in a palette for a little while and I'll just kind of like relish in that palette and then I'll switch and I can totally switch and go the other way. Like maybe for a little while I'll work in black and white, you know, and do that. So I tend to, it's hard to say that I have a favorite color because it's forever shifting. So.
Well, so are there any colors you tend not to work with because you don't really like them that much?
Let me think about that now for a minute. The one thing that I with beads is I always mix my finishes. I don't like working in one finish. So I don't like doing something that's all like matte finish or all opaque or all, you know, lusters. So with my palettes, I always have a good assortment of different types of beads. I don't like doing stuff all in the same type. But as far as colors, like I don't think they're it. In fact, sometimes I like taking a color that's like maybe wouldn't have been my first choice and making that the challenge and figuring out how I'm going to make it look good. So I'm always up for adventures in color. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Carole?
Okay, we have a couple of comments. Lorraine is working on a project from International Beading Week, and it's a right angle weave and herringbone. And she's also reading the UK Bead Journal. And Bridget says that sounds like fun. And Nancy Graver says Laura's awesome because she encourages us to take her concepts and go off on our own. And Bridget agrees with Nancy and says you're so talented.
Oh.
Well, there's that old, you know, biblical proverb or saying. It's well attributed to Jesus, I think. Give a man a fish and you feed him for one day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for the rest of his life. You know, and I think that applies to what, Laura, to what you're doing. You're setting beaders free to learn more and to grow. And every time they do a project of yours, they learn more than they would learn if they were just following your instructions literally, completely, without having their minds opened to what else they could do, to the potential that lies beyond the literal instructions. That's what you're bringing, and that's a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, I love to be able to do that for people, you know, it's like there's a lot of value in creating, you know, doing a project and learning it through a design, but I feel like it's nice to leave that open so that people can take that and take what they've learned and do their own thing, because it's really rewarding, I think, to do your own designs or, you know, your own work. It feels really good, you know.
Do you find that you also learn from your students? I know they're learning from you. Are you learning from them?
Oh my God, tremendous. Like I learn more from them than they'll ever learn from me, I think. So it's why like I love being able to go onto the Zooms and see people from the masterclass. I just love it. It's really inspiring. It motivates me to keep doing more. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a dialectic, it's a give and take, it's a back and forth.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's it's amazing to just be, you know, to be in contact with people, especially like now, because without traveling and stuff, you know, I don't see people. I don't miss traveling, but you know, it's nice to be able to catch up on Zoom and actually have a person. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Bridget agrees with you on different finishes because it gives depth to the project.
Yeah, that's so true. That's exactly it. It's like you use the different finishes and one brings out the best in the other and vice versa. Like it makes all the difference when you're doing stuff to mix up the finishes. So I always try to do that, have a bunch of different ones involved. Yeah.
So Laura, I know you like staying home, but like if you were going away and like say if you were not going to go to Wales, which you know fairly well, or the UK, which you know fairly well, and if you had to go somewhere in the world where there had been a really amazing beading tradition and you could see examples of the beadwork in like local museums, where would you go? What part of the world would you go? Or maybe you'd go to 2 or 3 different parts of the world. Where would you go?
Where would I go? You know where I've always wanted to go, and it is a place that's very rich in bead tradition, is Africa. I think part of the draw, my mother grew up in Africa, so I've never been there. It's one of the places I haven't been, and I've always been interested in going there. And some of the bead traditions there are just, I mean, they're amazing, you know, all the different tribes and stuff. So
Oh, would you go to visit the Zulu in South Africa, the Maasai people in Kenya? I mean, who else? Who else is there?
Yeah.
All of them. The Yoruba in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Who else? The Cameroon grasslands people, Bamileka Bamum and Bamenda Tikar. A lot of amazing beadwork in the grasslands. Egypt, even people. There are beadworkers in Egypt, like the Bedouin. I think the Bedouin. Maybe they're not just in Egypt, but maybe in Morocco, in Israel. There were amazing talismanic pieces of beadwork. There was biblical or Hebrew beadwork. I don't know. There's just so many amazing things you could explore in that part of the world alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be a good trip.
I think you'd need at least a month, you know?
I would. I would.
And you'd have to throw a safari in there somewhere, like a humane safari, you know, like a green, ecologically conscious safari in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a foreign land. It is intriguing to me. So, yeah.
Oh, exactly. And where would everybody who's attending, where would you guys go? Bridget, where would you go in the world to see a certain kind of beadwork?
Oh, Bridget
wants to go to Wales, she said, and she has a question about your classes are on Zoom, ? Laura.
Yeah, so what I do with my classes, it's a little bit different, is I do the workshops as video workshops. So I release a class and, it has, like, it includes everything, the kit, and then the video, you get the video, which you have permanent access to. And I do it through Vimeo. That's the platform I use. But I also do like Q&As, like I'll do Zoom Q&As after the fact. And it's worked out really well because it's been a chance for, for me to have these projects and people have all the demos because the video shows every single step of the project. And then to get together and be able to meet up after that, which is really nice. And with the master classes, it's like ongoing, I'll have office hours every week, 2 or 3 times a week. And then people can just pop in if they have a question. A lot of times on those, people just come and we hang out and bead. So it's very, but it's nice. I liked having the combo.
I hope we haven't lost Laura. I hope she'll come back.
Me too.
I know we were having trouble with her connection last week. I think it was last week. But she knows what to do. She can sign out and sign back in again. Meanwhile, while we're waiting for Laura to come back, I want to ask our visitors,
so if it was just the video, it would feel very.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's weird. The connection dropped out, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, it's better than last week.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh my God. That was crazy. But yeah, so you guys heard that.
Yeah, we got it. Okay, I'm seeing that Bridget she wants to go to Wales, and the Levant would be awesome. I'm not sure. I know where the Levant is, kind of in the Middle East, but I don't know more about that.
And she's also going to make it a goal to purchase a kit.
Nice.
Excellent. And then Carole, what else are you seeing?
Well, Lillian wants to know how to find Zoom classes. And Lillian, I don't know if you mean Zoom classes, because Laura's classes are not really Zoom classes. They're they're on video, and then she has discussions and office hours after the classes, after you have watched the video and completed the project or are working on the project. And there are written instructions as well as video demonstrations. But if you are looking for other Zoom classes, I don't know if that's what you mean. There's, different, I have venues for Zoom classes, but again, they're not beginning classes. You need to know the stitches. So if you want to be more specific on what you mean by Zoom classes, we can, okay, that's fine. Okay, good.
And Laura, I thought of a couple more questions for you. What words of wisdom would you have for a beginning beader? Like what 2 or 3 things would you advise them to do? And then also, what words of wisdom would you have for an advanced beader who wants to break through and get to the next level in her or his beading?
One thing, like we talk about in Zooms we've talked about, and I have to say it was really good advice that was given to me really early on by a man who I did private watercolor lessons with him. He was a watercolor artist, and he said to me the first time we were together doing a class, he said, the thing you need to remember is you need to practice your art every day. So even if it's only for 10 minutes a day, you need to practice your art every day, and that's how you get better. And so I've tried to make that part of my life, and I think it is really good. You know, that is how you get better, is just doing it. So some days I'm lucky and I can spend all day doing it. Other days I get 15 minutes if I'm lucky. But I think that's would be my advice to both, actually, to beginners and to more advanced beaders who want to keep going with it. So practice
every day.
Yeah. Every day. And some days, some days you just do something kind of mindless, and some days you really take on like a challenge, and it varies. It's not like every day there's some days that you work and then by the end of the day you've had it and you just rip everything apart, but I think just making it a practice is important in terms of moving forward with anything, I think. But
okay, and you mean working with needle and thread, right? Or whatever your materials are. Does that also include sketching? I mean, do you find yourself drawing out your ideas, or do you work them out in beads?
Yeah, I don't draw. I sketch in my head. So what I do is I kind of come up with ideas, and then I spend a lot of time. I can think in 3 dimensions, so I can visualize the pieces in beads. So that saves me a lot of time, because when I sit down to try a new design, I'm like 90% of the way there already, because I've built it like in my head. And I usually have to iron out some details, but yeah, I actually don't sketch. I just design in my head. So
okay, and you do the editing in your head. Actually, science has shown that is the art of mental rehearsal. And I guess studies have shown that people who have never played the piano before ever, if they're taught to, move their hands as if their fingers, as if the fingers are touching the keys, and they learn the keyboard, then like a few months later, when they approach an actual piano keyboard, they're vastly further along than someone who has not practiced mental rehearsal. And they can take up piano very, very easily. And brain scientists have shown that there are actual changes in the brain and the structure of the brain that reflect this mental rehearsal they've been doing, before learning. So basically, you're practicing the art of mental rehearsal by designing pieces of beadwork in your head, editing out the bad parts that are not going to work. And then, when you get to the actual piece, you're in a state of flow, it seems to me, or much more likely to be in a state of flow when you start working with the actual piece. I think it's wonderful. I do it too.
I think, it's so time consuming, the work that we do, that if you had to try it again, you'd never get anywhere, So I think for me to be able to do a lot of it in my head, it saves a lot of time in the process. So
it's also the fact that you've been doing it so many years, you can do it in your head, because all those those whatever it's called, something like neurological pathways, the circuits are installed already for knowing which technique will do what, and which structures can be adapted and which can't to what you're thinking.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that does all those years help too.
Yeah, all those neural circuits are in place already. You've created the pathways in your brain to allow you to do this, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. It definitely saves me some time. So
Carole, are you seeing any more questions or comments?
I am not.
I think we're looking pretty good. Laura, do you have anything else you'd like to say or add to what we've talked about already?
No, I just think it's really nice we've been able to do this. It's great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure, and I'm grateful that Carole could join us. And at some point soon, Maggie Meister has been away taking a class in Europe, but when she comes back, hopefully she'll be joining us. And our next live Q&A with an artist will be Maggie Meister. on August 31st in the afternoon. That's a Saturday. So I'll be posting about that. You'll see in the next, few weeks. And as I mentioned already, on Friday night, I guess that's roughly 2 weeks from now, August 31st, the four of us, so the three of us who are here plus Maggie Meister, we'll be meeting just for a Beader's mocktail hour, where we'll share, recipes for mocktails and maybe, food recipes, dessert recipes, entree recipes. And also we'll share the pieces of beadwork that we're currently working on or puzzling through. And maybe as a group, as a collective, if we have questions, you guys can help us figure out these pieces. You can ask questions, whatever. It's just for fun. It's casual, no pressure. It's just stop by and check in, with our little community. All right. Lillian is asking, where do I buy Laura kits? Laura?
JustLetMeBead.com.
You buy them on Laura's website, which is all one word, JustLetMeBead.com. Lorraine? Carole, can you read Lorraine's
Yes, she
comment?
says, I've truly enjoyed every moment. Thank you for a wonderful time. Take care for now. You too, Lorraine.
Thank you.
It's kind of the middle of the night for you, or very early in the morning. But
yeah, thank you for coming, Lorraine. They're in Australia. Thank you for coming. Anybody else, Carole?
Bridget says, yes, I love this. I'm somewhat of a hermit in my old age. Ha, ha, ha. I think COVID did that to a lot of us. So
Me too.
Yep.
But we just keep creating.
Yes.
Yep. We just keep creating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like hermits. They get a lot done in the world, and they don't cause any trouble. They don't go out and, start wars and, cause political uproars and stuff like that. So here's a vote for hermits, beading hermits.
Yes. And Rebecca says, thanks for doing this. Congrats that it worked. Yes. Thank you so much, Valerie, for persevering. You're amazing.
Thank you. I couldn't have gotten through the two attempts that failed without you guys, without all of you. Thank you for putting up with our first two failed attempts. And hey, it's working now. So I think it's going to go on working, and we're going to do this more and more often. So We'll see everybody. I want to thank you all for coming. And I'm going to end the live stream now. I'll give you like 30 more seconds in case anybody has one last minute question to ask. Otherwise, I will close out the live stream.
Priya says, so great seeing you, Laura. Thanks, Valerie and Carole.
Thanks for coming by, Priya. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Yes.